What is happening in football? Is it now all about the money? Is Kylian Mbappe about to join Al-Hilal for 300 million euros? Is he going to join Real Madrid for free in 12 months' time? Is he going to sit on the bench for PSG? Or is he going on loan to a Premier League team or even another team across Europe to just save a year's worth of wages for PSG? Let's try and unpick some of the financial issues that come along with Kylian Mbappe's contract extension or not in the next few minutes. Kylian Mbappe appears to have fallen out with PSG, his current club, and looks like he's willing to walk away for free next season and sit out the next 12 months just to spite PSG. His current contract expires in 2024 and has an additional year as an option only on the player side, so the club cannot force Kylian to stay beyond 2024. Kylian joined PSG from Monaco in 2018 for 180 million euros, having spent 1 year on loan at the club. PSG has now received a 300 million euro offer in writing from Al-Hilal, the club that did want to sign Lionel Messi and failed. So instead, Al-Hilal have offered a record-breaking fee to PSG for the world's most promising player, or some might argue the best player at this point in time. But it's not just up to the two clubs, Al-Hilal and PSG, to decide what's going to happen. It's not a simple transaction where an asset is being purchased and sold by two parties. There's an employment contract embedded within that player registration contract, and PSG have committed to paying the player until 2024. Current terms are approximately £80 million a year or £1.6 million per week, or that's what's been reported at least. And it's going to be up to the player and his team to negotiate personal terms with Al-Hilal or any other club that comes along to buy his player registration now or even sign it in the future for free. But why has PSG decided to actively market the player now? What are the options for Kylian Mbappe, and what are the financial considerations from both sides? My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. This channel, Football Finance Professionals, is dedicated to teaching you about finance through the medium of football. So if you're interested in football finance or simply want to learn about the topic, please subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends and leave any comments below. So let's get started. From a financial perspective, football player transactions are not simple. Why? Because you have two things going on at once. The interaction of a player registration transfer, which from an accounting perspective is an intangible asset, alongside an employment contract, which is a commitment from an employer to an employee. You don't get one without the other when it comes to football. And quite frankly, the asset would be worthless unless the player and the employment contract came alongside it. When it comes to Mbappe, PSG signed the player in 2018 from Monaco on a 4-year contract, which ended in 2022. Or it should have ended in 2022. The 30th of June is a common date used for the end of player contracts across Europe. But on the 21st of May 2022, Mbappe and PSG agreed to enter into a new contract. That contract was for 2 years, taking it to 30th of June 2024, plus an option for an additional year on Mbappe's side, but not the club's. So the club cannot force him to stay beyond June 2024. But if you choose to do so, Mbappe could stay for an additional year. The 180 million euro transfer fee paid by PSG to Monaco would have been amortised or spread across the first 4 years of his contract. Now, given the fact that the negotiation for the new contract was so close to the end of his original contract, there would have only been a minimal balance of that 180 million left, because the club would have been expected to write that balance off to the 30th of June 2022. So we're only 4 or 5 weeks before the end of that contract before the club and the player agreed a new deal. That means that the balance would have been negligible going into the new contract. But what would have been capitalised is any club agent fees. So that's a fee that a club would pay to an agent to negotiate that deal. And if we recall, Mbappe was very close to signing with Real Madrid, and someone would have interacted with the player, likely his parents, and they could have received a fee for negotiating the contract on behalf of the club. That fee is an expense of the club and could be capitalised. And that balance, plus any residual balance of the original 180 million euros, would be being amortised over the next 2 years, not 3, because that's the commitment from the club. So as we sit now, there's approximately 1 year left of his contract, with any minimal balance, which is going to be negligible from PSG's perspective, including the tiny element of that residual balance being 4 to 5 weeks of the 180 million euros left to amortise on his original contract, plus any additional costs from the club's perspective, including agent fees that could be amortised over the next 2 years to June 2024. But from an accounting perspective, and given the materiality that we're talking about with PSG, we can assume a net book value of 0 when it comes to Kylian Mbappe, even now. That means that any fee received by PSG would be almost pure profit from an accounting perspective and contributing to FFP. So 300 million euros would go an extremely long way in making sure that PSG could comply now and in the future for UEFA's financial sustainability regulations. And given that they've already been fined an upfront fee of 10 million euros and entered into a settlement agreement to ensure that they can comply in the future, 300 million euros will go an extremely long way. So it's definitely in the interests of the club to ensure that they get a fee from the player that's seen to be the most valuable in the world. And that's proven from a record-breaking transfer deal that could be being negotiated at this point in time and a written offer from Al-Hilal of Saudi Arabia. 300 million euros of profit could be hitting the P&L of PSG in the coming weeks. The alternative is that the player could stay for the remainder of his contract and potentially sit on the bench or play with the reserves. And that would only happen if the club and the player cannot agree on what's going to happen next. But it looks like the player could sit out that full season, being stubborn, some might argue, just so that he can sign for Real Madrid, his dream club, as a free agent. Well, what's the advantage of this? Well, from PSG's perspective, there definitely is one. It's in the interests of PSG to recoup as much of the transfer fee that they've already paid out, and from an accounting perspective, that's been written off, so they'll be able to record a pure profit on any fee that's generated. And the closer that a player gets to the end of their contract, their value reduces. Why? Because they can walk away as a free agent at the end of that contract. And financially, that could also make sense for the most valuable player in the world. Why? Because clubs holistically look at the acquisition costs or the total costs of acquiring a player over the contractual term. That includes transfer fees, image rights, agent fees, and salaries. So if the transfer fee was nil or negligible, it means that that amount could be rebalanced into the rest of that equation, benefiting primarily the player when it comes to salaries, potentially image rights if they're on the table, or even the agent fee. The downside in this scenario is for PSG, in that they would have to fork out the rest of the player's contract in terms of his wages, which is approximately £80 million, and they would not generate any fee from the sale of his player registration. And there have been some ridiculous rumours coming out of Saudi Arabia and other places. It's rumoured that Kylian Mbappe will receive 700 million euros for just 1 year playing in Saudi Arabia. And the 300 million euros would have to be written off as a transfer fee into the P&L of Al-Hilal, meaning it would cost €1 billion both in cash and in expenses for the profit and loss account of Saudi Arabian club Al-Hilal. And that amount would hit the profit and loss account in just 1 year. Something that all European clubs would not be able to tolerate when it comes to financial fair play. But Saudi Arabian clubs do not need to comply with European FFP regulations. And there are no equivalent regulations in Saudi Arabia. And with 4 75% PIF owned clubs, it's in the interests of the Saudi Arabian government, PIF and those 4 clubs to attract talent to make the league competitive at any cost. But the option of signing Kylian Mbappe for 1 year for €1 billion, although it seems ridiculous and potentially short-termist, could get more and more eyes on the Saudi Arabian Pro League. And is it worth it? Why don't you leave your comments below? After that 12-month period, if it were to happen that he signed a 1-year deal, he could then go on to sign for Real Madrid in the same time frame that he would having sat on the bench at PSG for that 12-month period. He would be playing competitive football in a first-team environment with some of the best players in the world that have recently joined the Saudi Pro League. So if personal terms can be agreed, and it could be quite attractive for a very short-term period of time, it could be a realistic option for Kylian Mbappe. The best outcome for both the player and PSG is potentially that Real Madrid comes in with a counter offer. The player then gets to play for the club that he wants to play for, and PSG recoup a fee for the most valuable player in the world. But will this happen? The relationship between club and player appears to have broken down, and it might be that neither party wants to do the other one a favour. And it looks like the standoff is such that both are willing to be stubborn when it comes to negotiation. But there's one other factor that many people aren't talking about when it comes to Al-Hilal or a potential lucrative move for Kylian Mbappe, or any other player for that matter. And that's the FIFA football agent regulations and the agent fee cap. That comes into place in October 2023, and it caps the level of agent fees that are payable from a player or a club to agents for negotiating these types of deals. Given that cap comes into place beyond the end of the transfer window for summer, it means that this window is the final window where agent fees are uncapped. Agent fees are usually linked to players' salaries or transfer fees. And given that there is a potentially record-breaking transfer fee and an eye-watering sum when it comes to the player's salary, there is a paycheck on the table for Kylian Mbappe's agents. And in the past, the player has been represented by his parents. And that means that there is a huge financial incentive for the Mbappe family to get Kylian to move to Saudi Arabia, at least for 1 year. Something that could set him up for life. Not just him, but generations beyond him. Now, given that he's been advised by his parents and his parents are going to potentially benefit from this transaction without being capped, could it be that they convince him to move for at least just 1 year to a league which may be seen to be substandard for the best player in the world, but eventually allows him to achieve his ambitions of playing for Real Madrid whilst getting paid a substantial amount of money and playing relatively competitive football? There would also be another deal to be done in 12 months' time once those agent regulations have changed, and another fee would potentially be payable to his agents. So it's a potential double whammy there for the player's parents. But what do you think about Kylian Mbappe's situation, the ridiculous financial amounts that are being talked about, and where will he end up? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. We hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.